My name is Ethan Walker, and the day my boss fired me in front of the entire team was the day he believed he had taken everything from me. The meeting room was cold, all glass walls and polished steel, the kind of place designed to make people feel small without anyone ever raising their voice. I had worked at that company for 7 years. 7 years of late nights, skipped vacations, loyalty I never questioned. I had built systems they relied on every single day. I had fixed mistakes that were never mine and kept quiet when credit went elsewhere. That morning, my manager, Richard Cole, called an emergency all-hands meeting. No agenda. No explanation. Just a calendar invite that made my stomach tighten before I even walked into the room. Everyone was there. Analysts, developers, project leads. Even HR sat quietly in the corner, laptops open, faces carefully neutral. I took my usual seat, notebook in front of me, pen in hand, unaware that it would be the last meeting I would ever attend as an employee. Richard stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, jaw set. He didn't waste time. "We need to address a performance issue," he said, eyes locking onto mine. I felt every head in the room turn toward me. My pulse quickened, but my face stayed calm. I had done nothing wrong. Or so I thought he believed. Richard continued, his tone sharp and rehearsed. "Ethan has failed to meet expectations. His work has caused delays and risked client trust." The words landed heavy, unfair, and deliberately public. I opened my mouth to speak, then stopped. Something in his expression told me this wasn't a conversation. It was a sentence. He went on, listing half-truths and distorted timelines, framing problems he himself had created as my failures. I could feel my colleagues shifting uncomfortably, some avoiding my eyes, others watching like they were witnessing an accident they didn't know how to stop. Finally, Richard said the words he had clearly been waiting to say. "Effective immediately, your employment is terminated." Silence followed. Thick. Embarrassing. Final. He slid a folder across the table toward me without looking. "HR will escort you out." That was it. No acknowledgement of my years there. No private conversation. Just humiliation, carefully staged. I stood up slowly, collected my notebook, and nodded once. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. And that, more than anything, seemed to confuse him. As I walked out of the room, I caught a glimpse of his face. He looked satisfied. Victorious. Like a man who believed he had just crushed a problem. What Richard didn't know was that weeks before that meeting, I had already seen the cracks forming. I had access to systems most people didn't fully understand. Financial logs. Audit trails. Email threads that didn't quite add up. I had noticed irregular approvals, budget reallocations that quietly benefited projects tied directly to Richard's bonuses. I had saved copies, not because I planned to use them, but because something in my gut told me to be careful. Loyalty had taught me to stay quiet. Survival had taught me to document everything. As HR escorted me to my desk, I packed my things under the watchful eyes of coworkers who suddenly didn't know how to talk to me. Some whispered apologies. Some said nothing. I didn't blame them. Fear makes people obedient. I walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box that held nothing of real value. The real value was already somewhere else. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, the shock finally caught up to me. Not fear. Not panic. A strange, steady clarity. I replayed the meeting in my head and realized something important. Richard hadn't fired me because I was incompetent. He had fired me because I was inconvenient. I knew too much. I had asked the wrong questions. I had stopped being predictable. Over the next few days, messages trickled in. Former teammates checking in quietly. One of them said something that stayed with me. "You looked calm. Like you expected it." Maybe I had. Losing my job hurt, but losing my illusions hurt more. I no longer believed hard work protected you. I no longer believed silence kept you safe. What Richard still didn't understand was that firing me publicly hadn't silenced me. It had freed me. Because once you take away someone's badge, you also take away your leverage over them. And the truth has a way of surfacing when the person holding it has nothing left to lose. I didn't act immediately. I didn't send emails or make calls in anger. I waited. I organized everything. Dates. Documents. Proof. I spoke to a lawyer quietly, anonymously at first. She listened carefully, then said something that confirmed what I already suspected. If this is accurate, she said, your firing might be the least of his problems. That was the moment I understood the real shift in power had already happened. Richard thought the story ended when I walked out of that room. He had no idea it was just beginning. And what was coming would not be loud, dramatic, or impulsive. It would be precise. Legal. Unavoidable. He had fired me in front of the whole team to prove he was untouchable. What he didn't know was that I had already touched the truth. And the truth, once released, doesn't care who you thought you were. The first thing I noticed after I was fired was how quiet my phone became. No work notifications. No Slack pings. No last-minute requests dressed up as urgency. For the first time in years, my time was entirely my own. That should have terrified me. Instead, it gave me space to think. I spent the first 2 days doing nothing dramatic. I slept. I went for long walks. I let the shock settle until it stopped buzzing in my bones. Then I opened my laptop. Everything I needed was already there, neatly organized in folders I had created months earlier without fully understanding why. Audit logs. Internal emails. Approval chains. Budget reallocations tied to projects Richard personally oversaw. At the time, I had told myself it was just good practice. Now, it felt like instinct. I read through everything slowly, carefully, resisting the urge to rush. Patterns emerged the way they always do when you stop looking away. Numbers that were moved just enough to avoid triggering alerts. Vendors approved without competitive review. Emails where Richard subtly pressured finance to adjust timelines to make quarterly reports look healthier than they were. None of it screamed scandal on its own. Together, it told a very clear story. On the third day, I received an email from HR. Polite. Neutral. It outlined severance terms and included a confidentiality clause that would prevent me from discussing internal matters. I read it twice and smiled. They were nervous. They just didn't know why yet. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. Her reply came quickly. Do not sign anything. That night, I got a call from a former coworker. His voice was low, cautious. Richard's asking questions, he said. About you. I thanked him and hung up. The silence I had chosen was already working. People expect reactions when they hurt you. Anger. Threats. Desperation. When those don't come, discomfort sets in. A week passed. Then another. I stayed quiet. No social media posts. No public complaints. No LinkedIn updates. Meanwhile, I continued preparing. I wrote a timeline so detailed it left no room for interpretation. I labeled every file, cross-referenced every email. I practiced explaining it out loud until it sounded calm, factual, unassailable. One afternoon, my lawyer called me. We're ready, she said. The question is how visible you want this to be. I didn't answer immediately. I thought about the meeting room. The glass walls. The way Richard had looked at me when he thought he was ending my story. Not loud, I said finally. Just official. We filed a formal complaint with regulatory authorities and submitted documentation to the company's board through proper legal channels. No accusations. Just facts. No emotional language. Just evidence. The response was slower than I expected, but not absent. 2 weeks later, I heard the first rumor. An internal audit had been initiated. Then another. A compliance review. Meetings behind closed doors. Richard stopped holding all-hands meetings. He started canceling appearances. People noticed. My phone buzzed again, this time with messages that felt different. Something is happening. HR's interviewing people. They asked about Richard. I remained silent. The most dangerous thing about the truth is that once it's introduced into a system built on control, it starts to move on its own. I imagined Richard at his desk, rereading emails he once wrote confidently, now searching for deniability. I imagined him wondering why I hadn't tried to fight back publicly, why I hadn't threatened him, why I hadn't begged. Silence forces people to fill in the blanks with their worst fears. One evening, he finally called me. I stared at his name on my screen before answering. "Ethan," he said, trying to sound casual. "I think we need to talk." I kept my voice even. "About what?" He paused. "There's been some confusion internally." "Confusion?" I almost laughed. "I'm sure," I said. He cleared his throat. "If there's anything you want to discuss, we can handle it privately." I took a breath. "You chose to handle my firing publicly," I replied. "I'm choosing not to." He was quiet then. Truly quiet. The kind of quiet that tells you someone is recalculating everything they thought they knew. "What do you want?" he finally asked. I answered honestly. "Nothing." That frightened him more than any demand could have. Over the next month, the company changed. Not dramatically. Subtly. Richard's authority eroded. Decisions he once made alone now required approval. His emails were scrutinized. His tone softened. Then, one morning, I received an email from my lawyer. "The board has requested a formal statement from you." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. This was the moment. Not of revenge, but of resolution. When I gave my statement, I spoke clearly, without embellishment. I did not insult Richard. I did not speculate about his motives. I presented facts. Dates. Documents. Outcomes. The room was quiet when I finished. One board member nodded slowly. Another thanked me for my professionalism. I left knowing I had done exactly what I needed to do. 2 weeks later, the news became official. Richard Cole had been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal investigation. The announcement was brief. Clinical. No explanation. No apology. Just consequences unfolding in plain sight. I sat alone in my apartment when I read it, not celebrating, not smiling. Just breathing. I thought about the meeting room again. About how small I had felt. And I realized something important. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits. Richard had fired me in front of everyone to prove he was in control. What he was about to learn was that control borrowed from fear never survives the truth. And the final part of this story, the part he would remember forever, was still ahead. The day everything finally collapsed did not come with sirens or headlines. It arrived quietly, the way truth usually does, slipping into the room and changing the temperature before anyone realized what was happening. I was at home when my phone rang, my lawyer's name lighting up the screen. I answered, already knowing this was the call that would close the chapter Richard believed he had ended weeks ago. She didn't waste time. "The investigation is complete," she said. "The board has made its decision." I leaned back in my chair and listened as she explained what I already felt in my bones. Richard had been terminated. Not reassigned. Not quietly asked to resign. Terminated. Effective immediately. For violations of compliance, misuse of authority, and deliberate misrepresentation of financial data. The words were precise, unemotional, and devastating. I thanked her and hung up, sitting there in silence as the weight of it settled. I did not feel triumph. I felt release. Later that afternoon, a former co-worker texted me. "You won, believe this." They walked him out. I pictured it instantly. The same glass hallways. The same polished floors. This time, no audience invited. No speech prepared. No folder slid across the table. Just a man escorted out of the building he once ruled, finally small in the space he used to command. The irony did not escape me. Richard had fired me publicly to demonstrate power. He was removed privately to contain damage. That difference said everything. In the days that followed, more messages came in. Apologies from people who hadn't spoken up. Gratitude from those who had felt trapped. Quiet admiration wrapped in careful language. I accepted them without bitterness. Fear explains silence better than malice ever could. One evening, Richard emailed me. The subject line read simply, "We need to talk." I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. The message was short. He said he never expected things to go this far. He said mistakes were made on all sides. He said he hoped we could put this behind us. I did not reply. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because there was nothing left to say. Conversations like that are meant to soothe the conscience of the person who lost control, not to repair what they destroyed. A week later, I accepted a position at another company. Smaller team. Transparent leadership. Clear boundaries. During the interview, they asked why I left my previous role. I answered simply, "Because integrity matters to me." They nodded. That was enough. On my first day, as I sat at a new desk, I thought back to the moment I stood up in that meeting room, cardboard box in hand, feeling every eye on me. If I could speak to that version of myself now, I wouldn't tell him to fight harder or yell louder. I would tell him this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away carrying the truth and let it arrive where it belongs on its own. Richard never knew how much I had seen. He never knew what I had saved. He never imagined that the person he tried to humiliate would be the one who exposed him without raising a voice. And that is the lesson I hope stays with you if you're listening to this. Being fired, betrayed, or publicly shamed does not mean you lost. It means the story changed. Power built on fear always collapses under scrutiny. Silence, when paired with preparation, is not weakness. It is strategy. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated at work? Have you ever watched someone abuse power and wondered if justice would come? Like this video if you believe dignity matters more than titles. Subscribe for more cinematic stories about resilience, accountability, and the quiet moments when the truth finally speaks for itself. And remember this. Sometimes the person who walks out with nothing is the only one who leaves with everything that truly matters.